Hello and welcome to Finextra. I'm Emily Horler and I'm here with Vincent Brennan of Bank of Ireland, and we're talking about open APIs. Thank you very much for joining me.
You're welcome, Emily.
So what's the latest thinking about how open APIs can create value for both PSPs and for customers?
So Emily, last year the Open Banking Working Group at EBA published its first paper on open banking, with a particular emphasis in that paper on the opportunities and threats for banks, and with a particular emphasis on the business model implications for banks in an open banking environment. This year we focus very much in on the customer. The paper is centred around putting the customer at the centre by enabling them have much more control over how they consume financial services and from whom they actually consume them. In an era where the customer is looking to transact anytime, anywhere and engage in electronic and mobile commerce, we very much see APIs and open banking as providing our member banks the opportunity to be much more relevant to their customers. There's a lot of focus in the industry around the potential disintermediation for banks, and in the paper what we've tried to highlight is how there's a real opportunity for the banks that take a much more proactive and a much more focus on the opportunity stance in the way that they approach open banking.
Is the industry making progress into turning open APIs into open banking and effectively delivering contextual financial services in an open ecosystem?
To be honest, progress is mixed. A lot of publications will highlight the fact that many banks are focusing on the compliance aspect of PSD2 and not necessarily on the opportunity. And that's understandable because there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of the final content of the European Banking Authority's regulatory technical standards, the timeline for implementation of those standards, and indeed the interregnum that will exist between the period when PSD2 itself comes into effect and when the regulatory technical standards take effect. So it's a period of uncertainty, and you can understand in that context that progress is mixed. That said, on the other side, then you're seeing, for example, in the UK, where 9 banks, which includes Bank of Ireland, have already launched APIs as part of the open banking standard in the UK. Across Europe, you can see individual banks launching API sandbox opportunities for developers, and I think we'll see a lot more of that development as we move closer to the PSD2 deadline and indeed through 2018. Alongside that, the EBA is playing a role in terms of encouraging dialogue around open banking through its open forum on open banking, through the publications of the Open Banking Working Group, and indeed for our members individually then through its task force on PSD2.
So how is the industry thinking about the use of digital identities in this context?
Digital identities isn't something new in the financial services industry, and certain markets, if you take Scandinavia for example, have been active in that space for quite a length of time. A couple of years ago, our working group published a paper entitled Digital Identity Moving from Check-out to Check-in, in which we focused on the assets that banks have in terms of KYC, AML, REACH, which are assets banks could increasingly leverage towards providing digital identity services. I think in the context of open banking, with the developments in terms of mobiles, alongside that APIs, and alongside that open banking itself, the real opportunity to leverage those assets is coming into effect, and now what you're seeing is banks becoming much more active in terms of making use of that. So much is made of the capabilities and propositions that fintechs are bringing to open banking, but increasingly the conversation is turning to the assets that banks can bring to bear, and increasingly what we'll see is banks starting to leverage their reach, their customer base, their AML capability, and indeed separating the customer identification from payments in order to play more and more in this space. And I expect we'll hear a lot more about this topic at EBA Day.
Vincent, thanks very much.
You're welcome, Emily. Thank you.
And thank you for watching.